Okay, you set? Welcome, everyone. I call the April 5th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting to order. The main purposes of tonight's meeting are study sessions on the Drews proposal for downtown affordable housing overlay and the middle housing plan amendments. Before we move on to the agenda items, I'd like to acknowledge our hybrid meeting format. The City of Bothell is providing the option to attend this meeting either in person or remotely via Zoom. For those participating via Zoom, the chat and question functions are not available for use to ensure compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. We have a public comment agenda item at the beginning of the meeting. This is the time for any comments you may have tonight. We won't be having comments during the study session, so if you have something to say, please use that time, and please limit those comments to 3 minutes. Public comment and hearing testimony will be allowed both in person and via Zoom. Those wishing to comment via Zoom are asked to submit an online form by 3 p.m. today. People wishing to submit written comments were also asked to submit those comments by 3 p.m. Email was encouraged as well and will be acknowledged. Those in attendance may also make comments and have been asked to indicate their desire to comment on tonight's sign-in sheets. And the sign-in sheets are over on the table to the side. If you wish to comment via Zoom when the time comes, use the raise hand function. The Imagine Bothell notice, city website, and tonight's agenda all provided information for the public to providing comments. Video of this meeting will be streamed live as well as recorded and available for later viewing on the city's YouTube channel. The call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone and listen live to the meeting. For our phone-in callers, during staff presentations, the staff will make every effort to specify which materials they are referencing so that everyone may follow along. At this point, I'd like to acknowledge the attendance of the commissioners. Commissioner Jones?
Here.
Commissioner Westerbeck?
Here.
Commissioner Curd?
Here.
Commissioner Robson?
Here.
Commissioner Anders? I see you, you didn't mute. Commissioner Anders is via Zoom, and Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
All the commissioners are present and accounted for. In addition, Deputy Community Development Director Ashley Winchell and Senior Planner Dave Boyd are attending. Lastly, before we begin, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For all attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking and unmute yourself when you wish to speak. If you are also streaming the live video feed, please turn off the sound as there is a delay. At specified breaks in the presentation, I'll be calling on members who wish to speak or ask a question. If you wish to speak, please indicate this by raising your hand and I'll call on you as I see. This will help avoid the problem of having two people speaking at the same time. Identify yourself before you ask a question, make a motion, or second a motion, or participate in debate. And please mute your microphone when not speaking. So the first item on our agenda tonight is public comment. We accepted visitor comment in writing as well as accepted sign-up sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. Written comments submitted to staff no later than 3 p.m. today were forwarded to all commissioners and are part of the record. And we did receive comments today, so those comments are in the record. So this time, again, is for all comments you might have. Deputy Director Winchell, please let us know if there are comments received.
There are comments received. Again, those were forwarded to you all, and then we do have several people signed up to speak. The first of those people is Mark Swanson.
All right, I'll ask you to come up to the podium, turn on the mic, and speak, and you've got 3 minutes.
It's from its December 3rd, 2021 article out of the Seattle Times, written by the Seattle Times environment reporter. First they circle, then they gasp at the surface of the water, soon they can't swim, then they die. For decades now, scientists have known something was killing beautiful adult coho salmon as soon as they hit Seattle's urban waters ready to spawn. They'd escape the orcas. The fishermen traveled thousands of miles only to be mysteriously killed as soon as they finally reached home. In a breakthrough paper published in December 3rd issue of Science, a team of researchers revealed the culprit behind the deaths of coho in an estimated 40% of the Puget Sound area. A killer so lethal, it takes out 40 to 90% of returning coho to urban streams. What's the problem? Title of this article: Tire dust killing coho salmon returning to Puget Sound, new research shows. It's a preservative in the tire rubber. The more traffic we have here around the oxbow of the Squaw River, otherwise known as the Sammamish Slough, is killing salmon. End of story. It's in the science. Stop it. Saltwater Park in 1968 was a beautiful place. Our family found it at 8 years old. I walked down that beach and the bottom of my Levi's got wet with the clams that sprayed up from the sand. There were geoducks there. 2 years ago, at a record low tide, I went down there and it's dead. No clams, no mussels, no tidal pools with anemones, I remember. And here we are. It's illegal on the Bothell Municipal Code for me to spray down crow poop off my front windshield in my driveway. Yet here I'm looking at permeable soil covered with pavement and no remediation for runoff water. It's not even the comprehensive plan. The GMA doesn't require it. What in the hell? Let me back down. Sorry. Rainwater gardens are not going to make up for fall rainwater runoff. It may rain 7 days in a row, but if I pull out my garden hose and spray off my windshield, I'm in defiance of Bothell City Code. And here I'm looking at apartment after apartment, and you have this middle thing. One last thing, 5 seconds. We do not have to submit as an independent jurisdiction to the GMA. We can sue them and get out of any of this. We can freeze development in Bothell at 0 today.
Thank you. Your time is up.
The next speaker signed up is Ann Agard.
Thank you for forwarding. I did make copies for the Planning Commission also, so, yeah.
Okay.
And I wasn't able to
Can you step to the podium, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wasn't able to copy the illustration by David Horsey, so I included that in your packet.
Okay, so I'll start.
Ann Agard. My testimony this evening addresses only, this is your item 2 on your study session, only the Bothell Vision Statement and the Shoreline Master Program element. The land use element, the housing and human services element, I will discuss with you in future study sessions. First, I recommend to the following Bothell Vision Statement, highlighted in red, additions to Vision Statements 1, 5, 7, 12, 13, and 15. The first two, 1 and 5, deal with adopting ordinance in the land use element and the climate element 2024, so that businesses and institutions will add a tree canopy ordinance for each sub-basin in the city and an ordinance for protection of heritage trees by 2024 in the land use element. Item 5 is the same as been proposed by the consultants. Items 12 and 13 speak to limiting the application of density requirements for new housing types and infill development in the shoreline jurisdiction. So those are the 12 and 13. And 15 is a requirement that by requiring new housing types and infill development, you include at least one visitability unit that is easily accessible by one step. The reason that I am suggesting the tree ordinance and the heritage trees to the Bothell climate change and land use element is supported by the recent IPCC, that is the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change synthesis report that came out recently that says that our climate emissions must be slashed by 50% by 2030. This is 14 years prior to 2044, which is what you are being asked to plan for in this comprehensive plan. 14 years prior to that, so that we can meet the target that is set in the Paris Agreement in face of all we know about the harm that would inflict. I need to finish just one comment. Thank you. Father, I won't continue that because you have it. I want to just refer to the Shoreline Master Program element and the policies on 138 to 140. I ask that you refer these to the Bothell Shoreline Board for consideration of and changes to the shoreline uses and modification element. And finally, I need to point out to you that the policy SH1 and SH2, which includes changes in RCW 58, is both inappropriate and illegal for the city to include. It's inappropriate because this is state law.
Thank you. Please conclude.
Yeah. And you cannot change it, and you can't quote something inappropriately. So thank you for taking a little bit of extra time.
The next person signed up to speak is Cliff Cawthorn.
All right. Well, thank you very much for letting me testify tonight. My name is Clifford Cawthorn. I am sorry. I'm the Advocacy and Policy Manager for Habitat for Humanity, Seattle, King, Kittitas counties. We've been working in the region for 37 years, working with community to build affordable home ownership opportunities for people that from really every walk of life. And I'm here tonight because of the second thing on your agenda, the middle housing amendments. So we're in broad support of these amendments, and for a very important reason: people. So folks like Janet or Aurora in our South Park development. So if you go South Park, which funny enough is my old neighborhood, that you will find a development of homes that blend into the neighborhood while also providing affordable home ownership opportunities for people who would normally be locked out of the market, and for some people who might actually be facing homelessness right now if not for these homes. And right now, Habitat Seattle, King, and Kittitas counties currently has almost 300 units in our pipeline. In fact, we're working on a project right here in Bothell. And these homes go in nurses, grocery store workers, sanitation workers, and the very people who keep our communities safe and healthy and make sure that our environment, both built and natural, is clean. And these allowing this moderate density in residential neighborhoods would allow for multifamily units that could blend into neighborhoods while decreasing our neighborhoods' carbon footprint, and also making sure that we have the housing that people desperately need right now during this housing crisis. And it is a crisis in all sense of the word. So I urge and I encourage you to support these middle housing code amendments, as well as to consider other affordability tools such as inclusionary zoning and other bonuses to allow for the kind of affordable housing that's going to make sure that everyone has a safe and decent place to live. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next person signed up to speak is Rossler Plantilla. You will need to go to the podium to address the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm here about the amend and the zoning zone. My comment is
So please state your name and,
Rosilier Plantilla.
okay.
I moved here in Bothell more than 30 years ago. I saw how Bothell grew, single-family homes were built. Lately, a university and college also were built. And lately, apartment buildings are showing up here and there. With it comes lots of motor vehicles. The street of 30 years ago are the same street as of today. Nothing has improved or widened except a portion of the Bothell Northeast by the City Hall. The street can barely accommodate the volume of motor vehicles, thus creating traffic in the morning. Example is Northeast 104th Avenue and Ross Road that intersect with Northeast 185th Street. Parking is also becoming scarce, as some apartment dwellers park at the side of the street. Allowing 5-story building without adequate parking for their tenants adjacent to a single home will worsen the situation. I'm appealing to the council members not to drive as single-family homeowners out of Bothell. I am not against growth of Bothell, but also take into account the worry and hardship it will bring to us single-family homeowners. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next person signed up to speak is Brian Inquist.
Brian Anquist, here in regards to the downtown transition and downtown affordable housing overlay code amendments. The latest code amendment proposals in the agenda packet show progress. There is an indication and acknowledgement that citizens are concerned and have expressed interest in ensuring any changes made don't disrupt their privacy and insignificant investments where they call home. I'm present here on my son's birthday while he's playing a baseball game to ensure you know my support of the proposed verbiage which provides protections from additional height and reduced setbacks based on topography and natural barriers. As stated in the packet and has been made clear to us, regardless of the two proposals, Carlson and Drews, whatever the Drews do and work really hard to justify, the code amendments are considered area-wide and would apply to the Carlson property as well. So think hard about that. Without protections tied to topography, as well as voluntary affordable incentives, Bothell risks allowing downtown-scale building development directly adjacent to single-family homes. Walk around here, look at the apartments, and imagine that in your backyard. Do the right thing, protect established single-family neighborhoods while allowing development where it makes sense in ways that make sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
The last person signed up to speak is Cameron Hilton.
Hello, my name is Cameron Hilton. I'm also here to provide feedback on the proposed code amendments that are outlined in the Drews proposal. I think that amendments to existing zoning or code should be rare and require exceptional circumstances that provide exceptional benefit to the public good. And I believe that the Drews proposal meets this threshold, and I applaud the Drews family for their work to support the IDD community and put their money where their mouth is with this. I was very impressed when I saw the latest edition of the proposal with the amount of affordable housing that will be included. I'd specifically like to highlight, though, that in the packet today, it did say that code amendments would be applied area-wide or city-wide or to all of the downtown transition district. So I think it's important that we get these amendments right. Specifically, I'd first like to express support for the proposed code amendments to allow zoning amendment changes, allow zoning amendments only when projects are providing 50% affordable units at an average 50% AMI. I think, and again, I applaud the Drews for their willingness to do that. Second, I support the proposed amendment to only allow zoning amendment changes in the DTHAO only when projects based on increased height of buildings and decreased setback of buildings on location and topography, only when they're based on the height increase is based on the location and topography of nearby single-family homes. The one thing that I did see missing from the latest set of code amendments was language to address how we're going to control for parking and traffic. I think that this is very solvable, and I have full confidence that the Drews family will continue to work in good faith to resolve neighbors' concerns. They've been great to work with so far. But I think it's important that we get this codified and clear because, again, the code amendments that are put forward will eventually be adopted in other areas like the Carlson proposal, where traffic and parking are even more fraught and more concerning than they are with the Drews proposal. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no one else signed up to speak.
Anyone else signed up? Anyone else in the neighborhood, in the audience? Step up to the podium and introduce yourself.
Pardon?
And introduce yourself.
Oh, hi. Hi, I'm Jerry Bika. Yeah, I just wanted to address something here and just call to everybody's attention. When we're talking about this housing shortage and things like that, first of all, in regards to the Drew Carlson proposals, I'm in strong opposition of the code and zoning amendments that are being discussed. And in order to justify squeezing hundreds more apartments into what's already turning out to be a saturation in the multifamily housing market. And I've been in property management for over 26 years, so I know these trends. And what we're seeing is just the tip of the iceberg here. With the thousands of apartments and townhomes already in place here in Bothell, and the numbers in the thousands more that are in the process of being developed and proposed at this very moment, such as we have Avalon's Seattle Times going up over there with 802 apartments and 110 townhomes. Trammell Crow's development over here with 369 market rate apartments. Right here on the corner of 522 and Bothell Way. And we have Bothell Heights with 59 townhomes on 91st Avenue Northeast. We have Ross Road right here with 3-story 91-unit apartments. And then we just started 102 multifamily townhomes over here by Safeway on Bothell Way. And the 76 studio apartments for seniors on Bothell Way. These are just to name a few. And then what about all the proposals that are popping up and down on Bothell Way here, including the 34 townhomes in the critical area along the Delicate Horse Creek, along with others. Also, we have the Forest Ridge on 191st sign just popped up, the proposal behind Rite Aid, with another 106 units. And these are just a few of the ones I've seen within a few mile radius of downtown Bothell here in recent months. Not to mention those we haven't even seen or know about yet. And then if we take into account the neighboring cities like Linwood, Woodinville, Kirkland, Redmond, Bellevue, we could add thousands more to this equation. According to one of Bothell's city officials, right here in Bothell, housing projections for King County through the year 2044
Got about 5 seconds, please.
are now over capacity, and Bothell has already tending to a pace that is
And that's
above
3
that.
minutes. Please bring to a conclusion.
Okay, so taking all this into account, we are seeing vacancy rates continuing to rise all around us, with thousands more going up on the east side and greater Seattle area. We're doing more harm than good to the landlords and multifamily property owners all over our region, with many already offering concessions with up to a 3 month's rent and much more. I'm asking you, members of this commission, to take a real close look at what's going on around us.
Thank
And
you.
ask yourself if it's really necessary to move up our hillsides into our historic and peaceful neighborhoods by altering the rules and trying to squeeze a few hundred more apartments into for a select few that are asking for these code and amendment changes. And thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the audience? Seeing none. Anyone on Zoom?
If anyone on Zoom wants to speak, please raise your hand. No one is raising their hand.
All right, with that, we will bring the public comment period to a close. Thank you all for speaking. Your comments have been recorded on the video, and we commissioners have been listening. So thank you for participating in the process. Next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes. We have before us the minutes of the February 15th meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? March 1st, I'm sorry, I didn't revise my template. March 1st meeting.
Chair, this is Commissioner Curd.
Commissioner Curd.
I move to approve the meeting minutes for March 1st.
Okay, it has been moved to approve the meeting minutes for March 1st. Is there a second? Commissioner Gustafson.
I second Sarah Gustafson.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the meeting minutes for the March 1st meeting. Is there any discussion around those?
I'd like to point out that there is a typo in the approval of minutes box. Commissioner Westerback should be Westerbeck. And we will make that change.
All right, any other comments around the minutes? Seeing no further comments, all in favor of approving the minutes with the change submitted, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, it is unanimous. The minutes of the March 1st meeting are approved. New business. Do we have any new business before us?
No new business.
No new business this evening? All right, thank you. Reports from staff. Oh, that's in different order. I'm jumping around. So that'll move us on to the study session. The first item on the study session is the Drews proposal for downtown transition affordable housing overlay. I believe Senior Planner Boyd will lead us through this.
Yes, thank you. And I'm going to start off by noting that we have been hearing this proposal together with the Carlson proposal at the direction of City Council. We are separating those. So tonight is a continued study session, but it's the first one exclusively on the Drews proposal. I'm going to share my screen. Are you the host? Okay. Bear with me for a moment.
technical difficulties as we look to share the screen.
I knew we should have tried this.
I made you co-host, see if that allows you to share your screen.
Here we go.
All right.
And that's not the right screen. Here we go. Okay. This is a continued study session. We don't have a date yet for bringing back the Carlson Amendment. We're still waiting for the applicant to provide some additional information. So the purpose tonight is to hold this first separated study session and to focus on the Drews application. To provide some additional analysis that has been done since the January 4th study session, which was the last time we heard this item. Another thing we did hear from at least one planning commissioner after that meeting that due to the volume of public comment that they wanted to not have any comment during the study session so that the commission had a chance to have some discussion among themselves. So that's another purpose for tonight's meeting. So we're looking for commission feedback on the mechanisms for additional height and affordability through the voluntary incentives that the Drews are seeking. Also on special setbacks and height restrictions adjacent to single family, and on retaining walls. And I did want to just touch again on public notification. Since we initially had combined these two, which are at the north and south ends of the downtown transition affordable housing overlay, or TAHO, we did have the applicants send mailed notice to residents within 500 feet of that entire area. This is a courtesy notice. It's not actually required. The code requirement is that we do notice boards, and there are notice boards on each property, and that we notice public hearings through our on our website and through our Journal of Record, which is Seattle Times. So we will continue to do that as we move forward. A little bit of background. The original proposal when we developed the downtown plan, and this is a map of the downtown sub-area, was for the transitional zones, downtown transition, the general downtown corridor, and the SR 522 corridor, were originally proposed for heights of 4 floors and 54 feet. And that's what was studied in the EIS in terms of the aesthetic impacts and also in terms of the density of development. During that review, the heights in the downtown transition were scaled back to 3 floors and 35 feet with a density limit of 20 units per acre. The density limit was removed for the solid orange areas on the map, and it was kept for the areas in orange with white crosshatch. And then that was all done pre-2018 when our housing strategy reinforced a pre-existing comprehensive plan policy, which called for whenever we increase capacity, we should be looking at providing affordability provisions. So the latest change removed the density limit from the area with the black crosshatching, the Tahoe area, and instituted affordable housing requirements there, which basically says that for any development of currently at 5 units or more, proposal is to increase that to 10, that 10% of the units should be affordable to households earning 80% of the area median income for ownership housing and 60% of the area median income for rental housing. The Drews application, the core of it is to allow a voluntary affordable housing incentive in their initial application that was in the downtown transition district. But since we've had initially combined these two and focused on the affordable housing overlay. That's the area that we're focused on for the affordable housing or the voluntary incentive. They also proposed to that for this particular voluntary incentive that the percentage of affordable units be 50%. We've done one other voluntary incentive in the SR 522 district, and that has led to the development of the SAMA apartments, affordable senior housing. That one, since the applicant was proposing an entirely affordable housing project, the percentage was set at 100%. But here the Drews are proposing 50%, and then also propose some conditions to go along with that. The Drews application is for 5 parcels outlined mostly in blue here. And it would basically eliminate the zoning boundary between those parcels and the downtown transition affordable housing overlay, where the yellow X is, and it would make the transition to the east to the straight downtown transition zoning, just a transition from the affordable housing overlay to the straight downtown transition district. We're also looking at whether, while we're doing this, cleaning up some boundaries that don't follow property lines, and we'll need to look into that further before we bring specific proposals back to you in the public hearing. The Drews application, this is a very schematic plan that was included in their initial application. As folks have commented, and as we've covered in previous study sessions, is to build housing that will include housing for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. It proposes to have a voluntary incentive to allow up to 5 floors, and the building would be located toward the east end of the property due to the topography, which is shown here in the lighter gray lines. They have since developed that proposal, and the proposal that's included in your packet is the same that was included in the presentation for the January 4th study session. So there's 2 levels of parking, one, and this parcel is really the only feasible access is from 96th and Thorsk, which is entirely within the downtown transition district. So that's one reason why staff has felt that this is an appropriate rezone here to make it match the zoning of the other areas with access from those streets. The proposal calls for 2 levels of parking and a double height lobby that would, per our code, would be considered a single floor on the east facade. And then above that, there's the second level of parking that is accessed via a ramp on the south side of the building. And above that, 4 levels of housing, small apartment units, essentially micro apartments, and these would be conducive. The ones on the immediately above the parking would have a courtyard, and then the ones above that would also face that courtyard but not have direct access. So this would lend itself to 1 or more of these floors being used by residents with intellectual and developmental disabilities. As the Drews have explained in their narrative project proposal, they do want to reserve the right to include some market rate housing, and they're not pursuing a development model that is typical of affordable housing. They're not. They're wanting to retain some flexibility and use the market rate units to help support the overall development, which is a model that we support. The idea of not segregating affordable units from market rate units is definitely considered a best practice. A few more diagrams for the Drews proposal. The diagrams on the right show a compliant proposal that would have 3 floors above grade, and on the left show their proposed proposal. And in the center is a diagram showing what the current retaining wall standards, the impact that they would have on this proposal, what they're trying to do here. And essentially what they would do is reduce the width of the area on the first housing level that would be protected by a retaining wall, such that it would compromise fire access and really limit the ability to develop the site. And these are 2 other sections. These are just of the proposed proposal, showing the alternate possibility of creating some outdoor space on the west side of the building with varied location of the retaining wall there. This proposal still keeps the building towards the east end of the site and away from the single-family homes to the west. And these are the revised massing diagrams from a number of different viewpoints that show the relationship to the surrounding single-family homes in the image to the left on the hill up above, and to the townhomes and other development within the downtown sub-area. This one
is north.
This one is looking to the northeast. Let me go back to here. The image on the left is looking to the northwest. The image on the right is looking from the north to the southwest. And this image is from the southwest looking to the northeast. So what you're seeing here in the background is the POP development, the apartment building, and then in between are the Fieldhouse townhomes. And in the foreground, well, in the far foreground to the left is a single-family house on the hill above. Next to the property is the Park Royal Apartments, which is a King County Housing Authority building, and next to that are the Landing townhomes across the street, 36. So this is 36th here and Thorsk Street here. The Drews also from January 1st, they submitted a parking study. I'll touch on this a little bit more later, but their studies showed that given the needs of the development to provide some parking for the market rate units as well as for staff and visitors, that the lowest parking ratio they could support is about 0.34 spaces per unit. A lot of the population, the IDD population, are not likely to have cars for this proposal. These are some images that the Drews provided on the left, showing some of the downtown developments, retaining walls, and these were developments that were done before the current retaining wall regulations were adopted. And on the right is a project that they've shown as a Lake City apartment project that they've shown as an example of the kind of units that they'd like to provide in their development. A little more on the retaining wall regulations. On the left is what is straight out of our code, which shows the stepped retaining wall that's required now. These were done largely because of the impact on adjacent properties. So all of the illustrations in the code, including this one, basically are for outward-facing retaining walls. In cases with inward-facing retaining walls, we actually have allowed some other solutions, engineered solutions. This is the Ross Road Apartments that has a heavily engineered retaining wall right on the property line, and then a raised planter to provide the 10-foot wide, the required 10-foot wide landscape buffer planting area for that. And then on the ground level of the lower level apartments is access for fire, and the retaining walls are held back far enough so that firefighters could get ladder access to the upper units. That's the type of modification that we are proposing to include in these amendments. It wasn't part of the Drew's initial application, but as they got into developing the concepts, this is one that came up. And we've had a previous discussion with the Planning Commission about this. And some of the questions that we wanted to, that we've asked and wanted to confirm is, should this apply citywide? Should it only be applied in conjunction with voluntary incentives? And alternatively, should the criteria for deviations in the public interest, which is in the current code, be better defined so that it's clear that this can be done, and to provide some criteria for that. The previous feedback we've gotten from the Planning Commission is that there was interest in making these changes and applying them citywide. We've also had some discussions at the staff level, and there is also interest there, but we haven't actually provided any code language, specific code language for comment. The other, and I'll pause and we can come back to these for discussion. Another request is for modifications in the special setbacks adjacent to residential only zones. So there's a 25-foot required setback from property line to the building, of which 10 feet of that has to be a type 2 landscape buffer. And then there's also an upper level setback that that currently doesn't apply in downtown transition, since the height limit is 3 floors. But if we allow additional floors, this upper level setback of 65 feet from that special setback line would apply. So again, the idea here is that we would allow that in cases where the topography basically establishes this very similar height limit. Therefore, if you've got a development where the finished grade is 20 feet below the finished grade of the adjacent residential only zoning, then you would get the same height with a 20-foot taller building. The Drew's concept plans that you've seen do include a 25-foot setback and room for the required landscaping, but they're still interested in having the ability to modify that. And so if Planning Commission is supportive of that, is there support for doing that for all the downtown transitional districts, or just for the affordable housing overlay? There's certainly an argument that we should limit it to the affordable housing overlay, since that's the area that we've noticed for these amendments. Planning Commission, if they wanted to go beyond that, could include that as a finding of an area of interest for future code amendments for council to consider. Or could it be done just in conjunction with voluntary incentives as a condition of those? And then affordable housing provisions. We've talked about when we had the two combined, the Carlson application was to allow an extra floor of height throughout by right and increase the affordability requirements, either requiring more units or deeper affordability. In this case, since the rezone would be from R9600 to downtown transition, there is also the prospect of increasing the requirement just for this rezone area. And the downtown plan does have some precedence for smaller area requirements. So that's something that could be analyzed with the Commission's support. The main focus has been on the voluntary incentive, as we've said, allowing up to 5 floors and 55 feet for projects that have, as proposed, 50% of the units affordable. The proposal didn't include an affordability level, but staff would propose an average of 50% of the area median income, as was done in the SR 522 voluntary incentive. That may need to be analyzed further with consideration that these are essentially micro apartments that are already the market rate for micro apartments based on our earlier analysis is right around 60% AMI. So we might recommend working with Arch a somewhat lower or a higher percentage in that case. So the question for the Planning Commission tonight is do you support this approach of the basic approach of voluntary incentives, and would you like us to also look at say this project doesn't go forward and somebody and the project is sold and somebody comes in with code compliant project with the upzone from R9600 to DT, should there be a special affordability requirement that accompanies the voluntary incentive? And then, as I said, the parking study that the applicant has done shows that the existing parking reductions for senior and special needs housing, which would apply to this zone, already allow for reduction of parking to 0.3 per unit with a parking study. So we don't think that there's a need for any additional parking amendments with this. So with that, I open it up for questions and clarifications. As I said, we will be looking to bring, based on your input, bring back code amendments in a public hearing if you feel at the end of tonight's discussion that you're ready to go to public hearing. I have left time here for the applicant to make a statement to you and then move into commission deliberations. So for starters, any clarifying questions?
So, commissioners, clarifying questions? I would propose we go through your issues as you presented them. So, retaining walls first. I want you to pull that back up and we can...
Oh, in terms of questions?
Yeah. So, commissioners, questions, comments? Yes, Commissioner Robson.
Just a really quick point of clarification. We were on this slide when you were talking about applying this citywide, and I just want to clarify, when you talked about citywide application, you meant just the retaining walls, not the other changes we're making within these. Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Westerbeck?
I can't remember if this came up last time. I'm curious if the Drews have surely probably had a geotech report done for the site by now. And if the city has looked at that and feels that the report's shown that the hillside's stable enough for what's proposed so far. I know it hasn't gone through full plan review, so you can't comment on that, but I'd just be curious if the site's I mean, I've worked on steep slopes and they can be real fraught. So I'm just curious if the city's been privy to a study that the Drews had done.
The applicant has shared with us an email exchange with the geotech that did a kind of preliminary analysis, and I think that was included in the January 4th packet. I didn't include it in tonight's packet, but certainly will be included in the when we bring it to public hearing with the full public comments.
Okay, thank you.
Other commissioners? So thoughts on whether it's with incentives? Went back up for a while.
Oh, sorry. It's here.
Nope, other way. Oop, too far.
Sorry.
Jumping around.
Oh,
So-
still on retaining wall. Sorry.
Yeah. So thoughts about whether it should be just in conjunction with incentives or generally applicable citywide for interior retaining walls? Commissioner Jones?
So upfront, I just wanted known that I live relatively close to this proposed development, so just want to make sure that that's known. I would be interested in seeing code language regarding this, this being applied broadly across the city.
Okay, thank you. Any others? Commissioner Westerbeck?
I have gone on the record before saying this, but I think adjusting the code citywide for interior-facing retaining walls is absolutely fine. They're going to be engineered anyway, and they really only affect the person developing the property. So since they'll be fully reviewed and engineered, they're fine. They don't really affect other people. So I know we discussed this before, and I think there was some consensus around that. So I just want to reiterate my saying that that's fine. You could do that citywide.
Others? I'd agree with Commissioner Westerbeck on that. We need to look at the purpose of the regulation, and if it's an interior wall, we're not protecting the views of others. So I think it's reasonable. All right, I think that's it for walls. Setbacks. So questions on setbacks. Should they be amended to address topography?
Again, I guess I'd like to just get clarifying questions first.
Clarifying,
Give
okay.
the applicants a chance to make a statement, and then we'll get into deliberations.
No clarifications? Okay. What, Commissioner Westerbeck?
So this is, and we're showing 4 stories here, and the original downtown plan in 2009-10 proposed 4 stories, 54 feet. But we're saying that they're considering 5 stories for Drews. And if that was approved, this would go throughout the DT, the Affordable Housing Overlay area. Is that right? So we'd be codifying 5 stories as long as they had the correct setback?
The correct setback and the topography that would.
Only the topography with the above, so like the ridge we've got over here, okay. So we would have a different rule elsewhere in the DT zone. So there'd have to be sort of some very specific language about residential, single family only couldn't be next to it, have to be above it. So we'd have to get somewhat detailed about that. Is that my understand? Okay, just want to understand that completely. Thanks.
Commissioner Jones?
So just a follow-on to that, just to make sure I'm clear. So the proposed code language would speak to sightlines or some other aspect that would allow for those site-specific situations, correct?
Yeah, sightlines were shown in the agenda bill, both for this meeting and January 4th as one potential criteria, but the one that we're more focused on right now is the topography, that if a building is sitting 2 stories below the adjacent residential only zoning, then 5 stories is equivalent to 3 stories on a flat site. So.
And why wouldn't you include sightlines as being part of that?
We can, but the feedback that we've gotten has been largely about the topography and not allowing this for zones that are, or for properties that are essentially at the same height as the adjacent residential only zoning. But we can certainly do some additional analysis on how you would craft code to address height lines. That's a little trickier to do in terms of code language than just basing it on the topography, but it's something we can look into.
Commissioner Curd?
Thanks. I don't know, if you have it off the top of your head, that's great, but I'd like clarification on definition of ground floor elevation. If we're going to be talking about differences of topography, it's good to work from the same framework.
So the code defines or bases height limits on average finished grade, and that is determined by averaging the corners of the structure per the IBC. We made a change a few years back, at least in downtown, to have the height measurement in the zoning code match the height measurement in the building codes, so that applicants didn't have to do it two different ways and reviewers didn't have to review it two different ways. So, and then we would likely apply the same thing to an adjacent site, is where could a building be, not just where existing buildings are, but where could a building be placed relative to this project, and then what the difference in height would be. And on existing zones, we would probably just go with base it on existing grade. Most single-family homes, finished grade is relatively close to existing grade.
Except on hill slopes where they're daylight basements, so.
Yeah, but you average the downhill and the uphill.
Makes it clear. Yep, thank you.
Commissioner Gustafson?
Sarah Gustafson here. I wanted to bring in a clarification that perhaps some of our community members here would like to ask. I heard concern that Drew's generated amendments would affect the Carlson site. My understanding is that this change would not impact the current Carlson regulations because the topography is different. Is that the case? Can we?
That's our proposal, is
Yes.
to develop criteria that takes topography into account.
Okay.
So that, and without focusing on one specific site, that on a flatter site where the development site is close in topography, this wouldn't apply. Or there would still need to be a relative 3-story maximum.
Other comments on setbacks? Seeing none, then the affordable housing provision.
So basically looking, again, whether Planning Commission basically supports the approach that's being proposed of a voluntary incentive with a 50% of the units affordable, and whether as a fallback, if we, and I think we're going to do this anyway, I think we have to do this as due diligence, but whether Planning Commission's thought about kind of a special requirement for this site, given that it's being rezoned from R9600 to DT.
I don't see any shade and shadow studies here.
Commissioner Robson, this time is for commissioners to discuss. There will be a public hearing later.
I apologize.
Yes, Commissioner Robson.
Thank you. I see that we're doing 50% of the units affordable proposed. What percent of AMI are we talking about 50% of the units at?
The application didn't specify, and we'll be analyzing that closer based on the proposal of micro apartments. So we'll take that into account and craft a regulation that would also apply if if things change and this is developed as standard apartments. So for standard apartments, it would probably be average of 50%, as in the SAMA project. For micros, it could be a little bit lower.
So 50% of the apartments have to be at 50% AMI?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the rough target that we're looking at. Yeah.
Okay.
Commissioner Gustafson?
Hi, Sarah Gustafson here. To dovetail off of Commissioner Robson's question, especially for the folks here, 50% of AMI, what annual salary would that be?
Thank you.
We'll bring that back. We rely on Arch to provide that information, and I don't have that on the top of my head, but we can provide that for the next
Okay. But
session.
I think to answer some of the questions that happen, I'm seeing in the audience, I think 50% of AMI is $100,000 for a family of 4 in this area?
Roughly, yeah.
Okay, so that's looking at $50,000.
Yeah, and the calculation is that a household of that, at that percentage, would spend 30% of their income on housing, no more than 30%. So that's how the prices are set.
So we're looking at $1,250 a month, about, perhaps, when I do the math?
Again, I'm reluctant to do the math in my head, but we'll come back to you with this.
Okay, thank you.
And to clarify the process at this point, this is a study session. The purpose of the study session is for the commissioners to ask questions of staff so that the proposal is further developed. There isn't the expectation that all the questions would be answered, but that we would get questions on the table. The next step would be a public hearing, at which point public comment would be invited, and then the commission would vote on whether to further that proposal onto council. So this is a step in the process. Other commissioner comments? Commissioner Westerbeck.
I just really want to quickly follow on Commissioner Gustafson's information. This is just informational. You can quickly find the AMI charts if you Google for King County, Seattle, HUD, and Arch, a regional coalition for housing. They all have charts that are usually within the last year or so. So you can find those really quickly if you're curious, because we know we throw that around a lot. So that's just some quick information, because I look them up all the time. So it can satisfy your curiosity, because it'll have the salaries that are accepted, as well as usually what that 30% is for housing, and maximum rent numbers and things like that.
Thank you, Commissioner Westerbeck. Commissioner Jones.
So I'm curious as to why 50% and what other scenarios were looked at, and how would we determine what the appropriate percentage is to allow voluntary incentives?
That's certainly a valid question. That's what the applicant has proposed, and maybe if they can address that in their statement here shortly. One thing I will say is that we do not think that a requirement of 50% of the units to be affordable is something that that many developers will do. That was part of the discussion with the voluntary incentives in the SR 522, is that it's really certainly at 100%, that's only going to be a straight affordable housing project that's fully funding itself through grant funding, subsidized housing essentially. The 50% will allow for projects like the applicants that are doing kind of a hybrid approach, where they're looking for some affordable housing grants, but they're also looking for socially conscious investors, and they want to have some flexibility to provide some market rate units along with the affordable units.
So just a quick follow-on question. So it says in the report that we got that staff intends to work with Arch on further analysis of the affordability levels. Do you have an idea of the timing for that? And any preliminary results regarding that?
They have been looking at this, and they think the feedback I've gotten is that we're in the ballpark, and but we would propose to bring those back at the May 3rd meeting, whether that's a continued study session or whether you feel that you're ready for a public hearing at that time. Same thing with the actual code language. We would bring back proposed code language.
Commissioner Westerbeck?
Sorry, lots of comments tonight. I want to clarify also, this is the voluntary incentive allowing up to 5 floors and 54 feet of height. That seems like that would be, again, topography based. Are we going to be looking at other areas of the downtown affordable housing overlay that would be, say, 4 floors or something like that instead, or keep it at the 3 floors, or is that going to be part of our discussion as well? Because it seems like at the Carlson site, for example, we're leaning towards no 5 stories, except if you were down on a hill. So is that kind of pertaining to Drew's specifically tonight? Maybe that's something I'm curious about. Or are we going to be looking at a different standard when you're on a flat site or you're uphill instead of downhill?
So on a flatter site, even with the voluntary incentive, there might be a de facto limitation that would only allow 4 floors, but that would have to meet the same 50%. Right. If that's
no, I understand that part, but
yeah.
The floor height, we might say, oh, you're on a flat site, so you can only go 4. A reversion back to the original proposal, for example, maybe of 4 floors and 54 feet or 45 feet or something like that.
Yeah.
Versus the 5 on a slope. Just wanted to kind of tease that out.
And that's one reason we originally combined these, so that we could talk about both of the options. But and I did have a conversation with the Drews. They're not interested in just getting the 4th floor with a requirement. For the project that they want to do, they feel that the voluntary incentive is the way to go. So we will, if Carlson comes back to us with a revised proposal, we'll bring that option back to you separately.
Okay, I understand. I just know that at the end of the packet it said these will apply throughout, so I want to be keeping in mind what would apply. Okay.
Other commissioner clarifying questions? So do we want the proponent next?
I had told the applicant that they would have a chance to speak to their proposal as part of the study session. So,
Great. Well, I'd invite you to.
Are you?
So thank you, commissioners and residents of Bothell. Thank you for your time. David and Connie Drews, and I want to start off a little bit by talking about the motivation for why we are looking to build this particular project. So we have a wonderful 23-year-old young daughter, very happy, outgoing, and does have an intellectual disability. And so in looking around at the options that are out there, there's just not very good options. And so we set out initially to actually just build a house, but based on some circumstances, we ended up acquiring the lots next door to the original lot that we had under contract. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to do something that benefits the community. So we've grown up in this area with other members of the IDD community, and we see the struggles that they have in finding housing, affordable housing for their kids and their young adults. So what we're looking to do is we're looking to solve a problem not just for ourselves, but also for others in the community. Our vision is to have about 100 units in this particular project. In order for the project to be affordable and for it to work, because this would be privately funded, and the reason for the private funding is there are a lot of rules associated with taking federal funds.
And in fact, in some funny ways, we may actually be discriminatory in trying to have 50% of the units be for IDD individuals. So we're seeking to avoid or minimize federal funding and seek social impact investors and others that would be interested in this particular vision. And in answer to the question as far as affordability, $1,132 is the current schedule for 50% AMI. And what else so just from a macro perspective, what we're looking at is, and this is really simplistic, but we just need more money to come in the front door than goes out the back door. And in order to make this type of construction work and be affordable, that is why we're seeking to be able to have 50% market rate in order to help support some of the 50% that is AMI restricted. So again, I would say our motivation is very different than, just so you know, I'm not a professional developer. And our motivation is to do something that would help the community and help a significant amount of people. And just one stat that I want to bring up is in the decade of 2010, first of all, let me give you a little bit of context. There are 37,000 IDD folks that are at risk for housing in the state of Washington. So this isn't nationwide, this is in the state of Washington. How many units do you think were developed per year for IDD in the 2010s per year? The answer is 28 units were developed per year. So there's a real lack of supply of affordable housing for IDD individuals. And while in some ways this is a drop in the ocean, we do want to do what we can do to at least alleviate the challenges for, say, 50 IDD families. Another concern that has been expressed is the affordable housing, and would that bring more crime or bring down the property values? And I just want to point out that this is next to an existing King County Housing Authority building. So it's already there. That building is already there. Number one. Number two, the parents of IDD, the parents and family of IDD individuals, the number one thing that they say that they are concerned about is safety. And so what we're looking to do is to build a project that is safe, affordable, and fits in well with the neighborhood. Any comments to add?
I think you said it all. But I mean, I think one of the things I would point out too is that Bothell is a place for everyone. And just like the gentleman shared earlier about all these apartments that are going up right and left, it's true, they are, but they're all kind of the same. None of them are doing what we're doing, so we're making a lot more spaces for, single, double income, career people, students, so that's different. And then the other piece is when we talked about having market rate apartments mixed in with having a place for individuals with disabilities, is we really want to develop community. And that is a driving force for us. It's not just to put up an apartment building and stick people in it. We want community. And that is a big, huge piece. And so we want to have the market rate individuals in community with individuals with disabilities, because that's life. I mean, as our culture is changing. I mean, people, like, I don't know, one out of how many people have somebody in their family or related to them that might fit that category, right? And next thing you know, they're going to be your courtesy clerk at the grocery store. They're going to be working next to you in the office. I mean, it's like, well, they need to be living among their peers and people too, right? And so that's just it's a huge hole. And like Dave said, it's for us, it's about making the numbers work to see the vision to the end. And I understand that we're not political people. We don't understand a lot of this. I should say, I don't understand a lot of this code and stuff. We just want to make our dream come to a reality, to provide for more individuals here in Bothell. So it is a place for everyone, not just for a day, but for a lifetime.
Thank you.
Thank
Why
you.
don't you hold and see if any commissioner questions? Commissioner Gustafson?
Yes, Sarah Gustafson here. First of all, extremely excited about this and lots of gratitude for your family. Thanks for specifying that the rent at the affordable level would be $11.32 a month. And that's just for one micro apartment, right? Okay. And then the market rate rent would be, what are we thinking about?
If you look at the boat on 125th and Lake
Right.
City, it's hard to tell if it would be the same, but they tend to have market rate in the $1,100, $1,200, $1,300 range, and then the one bedrooms tend to be in the $1,500 to $2,000 range. So we envision our project having a mixture
Right.
of studio and one bedroom.
Okay.
Part of by having the smaller apartments,
Right.
that ends up creating it more accessible
Right.
for people. And that's something that you don't find here in Bothell. So it is something that is different and new, but it has been highly successful in other areas.
With an affordable developer that I was speaking with, he said a lot of times what people are looking for is they're not looking for amenities, they're not looking for parking, they're not looking for workout facilities in the building. They're basing their decision on what is the price of the building. And if you look at a lot of the new buildings that are going up in this area, a lot of the ones that were mentioned, a lot of those are in that $2,000 to $3,000 range. And so this would be significantly below other units.
And it's not something that's for everybody, but it is something that's needed for some people. And I also want to reiterate too, for us, considering that we have a daughter that we envision living there, and we think about the population in general, just because it's affordable, we're not wanting it to be this, cut corners type of place. It's going to be a nice living space for all people.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other commissioner questions? All right, thank you for coming and talking to us tonight. So, Dave, next step then.
Well, as I said, one comment was that there wasn't time for any discussion among the commission. So if there is any further deliberation you want to do now, I think I've gotten pretty good, just from the clarifying question, pretty good idea of direction from the planning commission. But I did want to give you the chance to have some further discussion.
Commissioner Curd.
Thanks. Not to beat a dead horse, but for retaining walls. I, again, am in strong support of citywide modifications. It's been a long time thing that I've talked about a lot. And one of the things that I envision in a more citywide code to be flexible while also still protecting life and property is some sort of connection to make sure that larger retaining walls are engineered or approved by some engineering processes. So I know that there were such things in the older codes before modifications, and so I'm keenly interested in reviewing those changes.
And I guess I would say that certainly on a site like this, any retaining walls would have to be engineered and would likely be peer reviewed going through the review process.
Other questions, comments? Commissioner Westerbeck?
Of course, I've been on the record saying this before, but the upper level 65-foot setback, I still feel is probably excessive, and I really appreciate that the staff originally did that with the typical floor plates in mind for double-loaded corridors and 5/1 type buildings. But as we can see with the view diagrams, it's probably much 65 feet is probably excessive. I imagine we could give people what they were hoping for, minimize sight lines out of adjacent zones with something more like a 25-foot setback or 30-foot setback instead of a 65. A lot of sites aren't even 65 feet deep. I know this came up before when we were discussing a fourth story overlay up in the, north of downtown. Anyway, I just want to throw that out there again, that to make this more useful for the people who are going to develop, that we could still probably achieve the same ends and have a lesser setback than 65 feet for that top floor.
Other commissioners? And I'll make a comment I've made before as well. As we look at parking reductions, it really points out the need for parking enforcement in Bothell. Parking regulations are routinely ignored in the city, and it's pretty well known that they're not enforced. One reason I think there are problems with street parking is people choose not to use the parking in the buildings and pay for that and park for free on the street using a public resource for private benefit. So parking enforcement has to be faced sooner or later. Commissioner Robson?
Just to piggyback on what you said, is that what I really fear is that I feel like we're putting in a reasonable amount, tailoring the new parking regulations to appropriately accommodate all the cars, as long as people follow the rules. And what I'm afraid of is that if the parking regulations aren't maintained, there will be a pushback. Yes. And when this comes up again, people will say, no, we need more parking, and it will essentially undo what we have laid out very carefully, because we're envisioning it in one way and it isn't being enforced. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's really important, that as we consider that all of these changes we're making, it sort of, I know it's not in our purview, it piggybacks along with effective parking enforcement.
Other comments on this item? Mr. Curd?
Yeah, I'd just say that we should definitely add this as a commission finding. Probably just on every single thing that we ever issue from here on up until it's addressed by council. But yeah, I'd support putting that as a finding.
I cornered more than one council member on this. Any other? Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah.
Oh, Westbeck, I'm sorry.
You were first.
Sarah Gustafson here. I feel like we've put this in findings quite a bit, and perhaps we might want to send a message to council.
Put a banner.
Yes. Later on in the agenda, there's a point where we can talk about what messages we'd like to send to council, and perhaps it might be time to escalate it to that point, with, of course, understanding that it should go through the diversity, equity, and inclusion process as well.
Sure. Commissioner Westerbeck?
All right, I'm piggybacking on that, but it's sort of beating a dead horse. We've talked about this before, but there's a 750-page book called The High Cost of Free Parking by Donald Shoup, who's an emeritus professor at UCLA. And he actually is very, very good at summarizing his entire book into a few points. And one of those key points is you really should not have parking minimums, but in order for that to work, you have to manage parking. If you don't have that, it is a free-for-all, and it does become what we have right now in downtown Bothell. So unless people feel like there's going to be enforcement, it really is the Wild West. But if there is enforcement, then people will create lots, or they'll create the amount of parking that they think their project needs, or a project like this that for which it's a burden doesn't need it because people are going to mostly take transit or bus. So it really allows a lot of choice and freedom, but you have to manage parking or else it just doesn't work. So Anyway, 750 pages down to 3 points, and that's one of the key points.
Thank you all. I've got a question for you, Dave. In the packet, since you're sitting next to me, I can point it out. You say 21 to 30-day notice. Now, we couldn't make a 30-day notice for the next meeting.
No, the public hearing notice is 21 days, so
Okay.
so we can do that. And that's one reason why I've asked for direction on whether you want to bring it back in public hearing or in a continued study session.
So I'd look to the commissioners. Do we need to talk about this some more, or are we ready for a public hearing? Mr. Robson?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this enough. I feel like we're ready for a public hearing on it.
See a lot of head nodding. I don't know that we need a motion for that.
No, that's enough direction for me. I did also stop sharing. Wanted to make sure that Commissioner Anders had a chance to weigh in. And I trust that you'll raise your hand if you do. And I can go back to the images if anyone wants to get into that.
And I don't see any indication from Commissioner Anders that she wishes to weigh in on this. So with that, I think we can bring this one to a close. And if you're ready, May 3rd, I think we are. Seeing as we've been talking for about an hour and a half, suggest maybe a 10-minute break. All right. So I see 7:31 on my clock here. 7:41. Reconvene. All right. We'll adjourn. All right. I am reconvening the Bothell Planning Commission meeting, April 5th. And the next item on our agenda is a study session around the middle housing plan amendments. And Senior Planner Boyd will lead us through this item as well.
Thank you. And this is the initial study session on the middle housing comprehensive plan amendments. I think you're all aware that the Planning Commission has made recommendations on the code amendments. And we're now tackling the comprehensive plan amendments. I'm going to share my screen again here.
Can you just mention the page number I should be looking in my packet here?
129.
120, thank you.
Oops, second. Okay. There we go. So I'll be presenting, but I also want to acknowledge that we are working on these code amendments with the help of our consultants from OTAC, and Jesse London is joining us tonight and is available for questions as we go forward. So first of all, I want to give a little background and context. First of all, what is middle housing? The way that we're defining it is as house-scaled buildings that house more than one unit. And the way that we've been talking about it in terms of the code amendments is that to provide the ability to for individual property owners as well as new subdivisions to provide a mix of affordable of middle housing that would be scattered in amongst traditional single-family homes. So the diagram on the upper left shows that, and the diagram on the at the lower left basically shows the income levels that middle housing will provide. So it's not, certainly it's not the whole answer to affordable housing. Truly affordable units that are in the lower ranges from 0 to 50% are going to be in affordable housing developments and most likely in the form of apartments. The middle housing code amendments that we're talking about also include revisions to our regulations for accessory dwelling units. So accessory dwelling units are likely to serve in that 50 to 80% of area median income. Middle housing, absent any requirements, will likely be in the 80 to 120%, whereas new single-family construction is going to serve households earning 120% and above of area median income. So that's the context. The background is that corner lot duplexes were permitted in 2019 with support from the first Commerce grant we've received for housing, developing housing strategies. Both when those were adopted, when Planning Commission made its recommendation and when Council adopted, both bodies indicated a desire to add other middle housing options. That we tackled with the second Commerce grant, and from the beginning we've been working with OTAC on these amendments, and that has funded the work, most of the work to date on the middle housing code amendments. Planning Commission made its recommendation to Council last October. Council has had 2 or 3 study sessions, and then they determined at their May 7th study session that the timeline of having Council adopt those by the end of March wasn't doable. So instead, they asked us to bring back a schedule that had them adopting plan and code amendments by the August break. So that's what we're working on now, and that's supported by a third Commerce grant funding these amendments, the plan amendments, and the implementation efforts. So those ongoing actions supported by the grant are more robust public engagement. We are working to put out a citywide mailer to inform people of these code amendments. We are looking to do a community forum in early May, and with that forum launch another survey to get further public feedback. We're working on a racial equity and anti-displacement report. That's one of the requirements of the Commerce grant that will be making recommendations not just related to middle housing, but kind of broadly throughout our comprehensive plan and development regulations. And that will all feed into the racial equity aspect of the comprehensive plan. OTAC has market analysis subconsultant, Eco Northwest, and they're looking at where middle housing will be financially feasible and they're helping with the anti-displacement report in terms of what are the areas in the city that are that might be vulnerable to displacement by the addition of middle housing in the code. And then tonight we're talking about the comprehensive plan amendments and bringing them into alignment with the code amendments that have already been proposed and recommended. So the goal of tonight's of the comp plan work is to enhance the comp plan's tolerance for the code amendments. 4plexes on all existing single-family lots, cottage and courtyard housing on larger lots in existing single-family zones, bonus units and new plats that can be met with middle housing, and removing barriers, additional barriers for accessory dwelling units, including allowing 2 ADUs per single-family unit and allowing a single ADU on a middle housing parcel. The approach is to remove and replace exclusionary language that exists in our comprehensive plan. So a couple of examples here are from the vision statement. A lot of these amendments are focused on the use of single-family zoning, especially exclusive single-family zoning in the city, and switching the focus to residential zoning and housing choices within the residential zoning. And the purpose of tonight's meeting isn't to get into the wordsmithing, but just to give you an idea of the direction that we're going with these. Another approach is, and this is one that we could use some feedback from the commission. The RCW, the Washington Code, basically includes a definition for moderate density housing, which includes what we've been talking about for middle housing. So rather than using the term middle housing in the comp plan, for the most part, we're using moderate density housing. So we're defining many of our existing single-family neighborhoods now as low and moderate density housing with the addition of the middle housing option. Another part of the code amendments were allowing lot averaging and lot reductions throughout, rather than currently they're only allowed in our 9600 zoning. So, and the comprehensive plan currently has some fairly specific language about lot sizes, and so we're proposing to change the reference to minimum to average, and also recognize that reductions as well as averaging are allowed more broadly now, or with the recommendation. And then another key approach is replacing the sub-area plans. All begin with, many of them begin with a statement similar to this one for Queensboro, Brentwood, Crystal Springs, that talks about preserving the overall single-family residential character. That's a phrase that includes a number of what are considered somewhat loaded terms. So we're trying to shift that away from preservation to maintaining instead of overall, predominantly in cases that are predominantly currently single-family. And we're including two options, and two options were included in your packet. One was kind of this tweaking the existing code language for each of these sub-areas. But another option, and I think the one that staff is leaning towards as a recommendation, would come up with kind of a new template for all of the sub-areas that would read something like, the plan for the sub-area provides for maintaining existing development patterns while allowing new infill and redevelopment compatible with the scale of the existing residential neighborhood. So getting away from the language, reference to character, and focusing instead on the scale of the development and the pattern of development, which is essentially what middle housing does. So these proposed amendments we're presenting for the first time to commission for your review and your feedback. So that's what we're looking for tonight, and happy to entertain any questions, comments. I want to make sure that this is in fact my, before that I did want to touch on the updated schedule and the next steps. So as I said before, we're looking to get a mailer out this month. We could come back for a continued study session in 2 weeks. if you feel that's needed. Our grant calls for the draft market analysis from Eco Northwest on the 21st. For staff review, we'll be bringing that back to Planning Commission and Council as we review that. And also, the state legislative session ends on April 23rd, so we'll have a better idea of what's coming our way from the state in terms of requirements. And then in May, we're targeting the 3rd and possibly continuing to the 17th for Planning Commission public hearing. And we have been targeting the 4th tentatively as the community forum and the start of a new community survey. That's tentative as we're trying to tie down the location. And then we would be looking for Planning Commission recommendation on the plan amendments in May and take them to City Council for a study session in June, study session or sessions in June. We have to complete the work on the Commerce Grant with our consultants by the end of June, but then staff will be finishing the process, hopefully going to Council for public hearings and adoption in July. So that's it. So I'm going to go back to this, this is a chance for feedback from the commission.
So, commissioners? Commissioner Jones?
So it's just terrific that you're moving ahead and doing this because it's just going to position the city to move forward so quickly once some of the other decisions are made. So just compliments. I had one question, and I totally understand and appreciate the removal of the exclusive language, right? And trying to change the overall tone and framing for the plan. I noticed, though, that there really isn't a mention of environmental sustainability or environmental goals as being part of the vision, the overall considerations. In the prior language, there was, it stated things like intrusion by incompatible uses. I completely agree with crossing that out. But I do wonder if only focusing on infill development doesn't minimize some of the other goals that are important in terms of the community. So I was just curious to hear what the staff had to say about that.
Can I ask if you are wanting specific goals in relation to middle housing and in the environment and climate change, or overall environmental goals for the comprehensive plan?
So I'll use an example. So in the vision statement, number 7, so before it said maintain strong residential neighborhoods through public investments and physical improvements intended to enhance neighborhood identity and through public policy decisions intended to protect neighborhoods from intrusion by incompatible uses. So you're changing that to allow for middle housing, which is awesome. But by doing so, it reads, while adding housing choices for all economic segments of the community through public investments and physical improvements intended to enhance neighborhood identity and through public policy decisions intended to facilitate a range of new housing types and infill development compatible with existing neighborhoods. I'm wondering if in the vision statements or those overarching statements, if there needs to be more than just existing neighborhoods, but something related to environmental sustainability. So I'm just asking that in general because, yes, the changes are needed to allow for middle housing, but overall, does it affect the goals for the neighborhoods?
So I'm going to step in here, Dave, because I think, so we have, the fun part of this is we're doing our comprehensive plan update and we're working on these middle housing amendments. And so the amendments we have before you today are just related to middle housing. And so then there will be further conversations with the Community Planning Commission and City Council about not just the vision, but the overall plan. We'll be working on a climate change element and things like that. And so I think those are good comments, but maybe more appropriate in the overall comprehensive plan update than just this. Not that we're missing the opportunity to add it in, but in the context of the overall plan, it might make more sense to make some of those additions at that time versus making additions beyond just the middle housing. Unless we wanted to have a specific language about middle housing and its impact on the environment or climate change.
Commissioner Robson?
Thank you. Yeah, I would really want to support the idea that we do, I think throughout our comprehensive plan, we want to state how we're focusing on racial equity and essentially creating a healthy city for people and our planet. And I don't think that there's any harm in restating that in every section of the comprehensive plan. If we can talk about maintaining character, we can talk about maintaining our environment, just switching one word, right? And so I think that focusing our verbiage on that is a really great idea to just kind of keep our trajectory and set a tone for the comprehensive plan. So I love that idea. Thank you.
Senior Planner Boyd?
One thing that does occur to me that was sparked by Commissioner Jones's statement is that one thing in the proposed middle housing code amendments are the flexible setbacks where used to preserve existing trees or create other natural features, water, rain gardens, that sort of thing. So we can look at adding a policy statement in here related to that. I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah, and that might be a good finding too, to have something about the connection to the environment.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Westerbeck?
I appreciated and I liked the idea of rewriting I guess it's sort of the preamble or the intro for each sub-area plan that you sort of briefly sampled there for us, Dave. I like that sort of fresh rewrite with a new sort of approach. So anyway, check me in that column. I think reevaluating that and trying it out as we go to the public might be worthwhile.
Commissioner Robson?
Thank you. I also have a question regarding our racial equity report that's being done. I really appreciate that they're going through and identifying, removing language and identifying maybe some vulnerable areas. But are we also having someone in charge, or maybe have a resource in charge of outreach to those populations that have been identified as vulnerable? And when is that going to be included also in that racial equity report for eliciting the concerns from those people most affected?
So I'm not entirely sure if it'll be included in the racial equity report, but the consultant, OTAC, does have a lead for their racial equity work, and all of the work that we're doing, including the outreach, is being discussed with that team. So we are getting that input. The other thing that's happening with the Commerce Grant, 20,000 of that money is going towards outreach to community-based organizations that represent and are helping us do outreach to underrepresented communities. So 5 communities within the ARCH orbit, including Bothell, are pooling their money, and we've hired a group called a lead community-based organization, East Side for All, and they're reaching out to other CBOs to try to reach those populations that we often don't reach.
We'll be able to hear from them when they issue it. Thank you. Will they be issuing a report to us then, or will they come in and speak? Will you relay their findings? How will that work?
I'm going to have to get back to you on the specifics of that. Mostly they're helping us make those connections to those communities as part of our outreach effort. But I'll see what sort of deliverables are in that contract. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Commissioner Curd?
Thanks. Yeah, while we're on this topic, I did want to bring up the work that had previously been done with UW about identifying cultural anchors in Canyon Park for the Canyon Park sub-area work. And I know there's been some like staff turnover at the city since then, but that was a really valuable experience, and just listening and learning about outreach work to communities that have not traditionally been outreached to could be a useful approach in this situation too. So I'm just wanting to bring that back up to the surface and hope that it's helpful.
Could be wrong, but I believe Commissioner Curd and I are the only ones who were here for that.
Maybe.
So you all may not be familiar with that report.
I remember watching it. That's about it.
I'll add too, so the racial equity report is almost like the first step in some of this too, because it's looking at the entire comprehensive plan. And so it's going to provide us with more information of additional places we may need to dig further. And so again, because we have these two projects going on at the same time, we're working with our consultant team on the comprehensive plan. They're doing some early outreach, and we're going to be doing focus groups and things like that. So we're hoping that this report will help us as we enter further into the comprehensive plan of looking for more amendments and changes, not just related to housing, but related to the comprehensive plan as a whole. So it's a first step, and there may not be as much engagement on the front end, but we're really hoping it helps us with our engagement for the comp plan, not just those focus groups, but through our engagement efforts with the overall community. And then we're also looking at ways we can include our DEI advisory group and things like that, so that we're continuing those conversations.
Just adding to that a bit. So OTAC and their racial equity lead consultant will be providing the racial equity and anti-displacement report. And then our comp plan consultants, Burke, will be taking that and taking it the next step. So that's another thing to keep in mind as you review that work. But OTAC is actually taking a comprehensive look at it per the state guidelines for this work.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Curd?
Thanks. I have a couple of things that comments that I had put together. I echo Commissioner Westerbeck with support for your rewrite of the residential nature section. I think that, there's something to be said about making tweaks to a document that's existed since like the 40s, but sometimes a refresh is needed. And I think this is one of those times that it's not really a rewrite, as just a kind of reframing for context around language. So I really support option 2. I liked that a lot. I'm wondering about how that language may unintentionally disincentivize future work that may come to the commission, such as affordable commercial space or corner stores in certain areas of the city. And so I don't necessarily think that corner stores are going to be everywhere in Bothell, but if that comes forward in the future, I wouldn't want it to be basically restricted because of an inadvertent, language in our comprehensive plan. So adding some flexibility, or just recognizing that residential nature, or the words that we say about what a residential area of the city is, means different things to different people. Like if you grew up in North Everett or something, corner stores are part of that residential area, but people who grew up in Medina, maybe not. So yeah, that was one thing about commercial space. And then one of the other topics that I have questions about now is the functional difference between R 5400A and D. Have you put in thought into the messaging around that, or?
Well, I definitely did that. We did have a discussion about, is there any functional difference? And the functional difference is that in R 5400A, you could do townhomes with more than 4 units that weren't courtyard housing. That's about it. So you could, for example, it's not R 5400A, but the Landing development, I believe, has some blocks of up to 5 townhomes in a row. That wouldn't be allowed per the recommended changes in R 5400A. So it's a minor difference, but it was enough a difference that we thought that it was, without going back and reconsidering the code amendments, to keep that distinction in the comp plan as well.
So I'm hearing that it's kind of ingrained into the code, and so that's why we're keeping it in the vision document. Is that kind of?
In theory, R 5000A could you could do a row house development that would have a whole block of townhomes, continuous townhomes. We haven't seen that, but that is the distinction.
Interesting. Okay, I have some more stuff, but I want to hear from others.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Westerbeck.
I'll jump in because I want to add to what you said about commercial. I had thought a lot about this too when I was reading through the packet, and I had a note that in some plans I've seen words something like low impact mixed uses. And it's more of the traditional neighborhood that we had pre Euclidean zoning, where we had, houses in one place and stores in another, where things were mixed. But only, that low impact is important because it means someone can have a hair salon, a coffee shop, but they're not going to have a rendering plant. They're not going to have a nightclub, smoke, noise, light, the things that really bother people are not allowed. But you can have low impact businesses. And we see that already, in home-based businesses and stuff. So we kind of have that. But this would, I think, crack the door open to, it's okay to have that corner store. Or you don't necessarily have a parking lot for it. But if you want to, or you want to, like Yonder Cider in Seattle, they were allowed to finally, after much, movement politically, to have their shop in their street side garage. So anyway, I would love to crack the door open in Bothell's neighborhoods for consideration of that. It doesn't have to be, we don't have to go in and change the code today or in the comp plan make a sweeping change to allow that. But to Commissioner Curd's suggestion, somehow open the door to that possibility in the future so we don't hinder the comp plan from, making it prevent that.
Other commissioners?
One thought I had on that point, many of the sub areas talk about predominantly residential character, and maybe that gives enough for without actually introducing low impact mixed uses, makes room for that. And I guess along those lines, we're trying to keep the focus here on middle housing, and there'll be other opportunities in the comp plan review to consider going beyond that.
Yeah, it came to mind, and I've been thinking about the comp plan for years, and so I thought, well, middle housing goes really well with light commercial uses and stuff, so I wanted to at least put a plug in for that. I appreciate it.
Maybe I could suggest that we include a finding along that so that it's not in this and getting outside of the middle housing scope, but reminds us that we did talk about maybe some more uses. And then that way, as we have community conversations and all of that through the comp plan, we can vet that idea a little bit further.
Yeah, sort of recording it in some way, and then, like you said, testing out with the public and so forth. And I think it's great, because I think, over time, that would be a natural evolution of the city of Bothell. And I know there's been some discussion about that in past planning commission meetings.
And this is the second reference to a finding. And I'd remind everyone, well, that findings are an important way for the commission to communicate, to first of all, to memorialize the discussion, and then communicate it to the council to make a standalone statement that this is important to us, and we want to be sure that it's not lost. So we have added things through the course of discussion and findings. Other commissioners? Commissioner Curd.
I'll jump in with my last thing, which is about language sensitivity in mailers and surveys. And I want to be cognizant of different connotations when people receive a mailer from the city. There's a certain level of action that some people might really want to take when they get an official looking thing. And the language that we use on mailers shouldn't be overly it shouldn't be overly exciting, I guess. So I know that this topic, already, I'm guilty of extending the topic to affordable commercial space. So it's easy for the scope to kind of creep, right? And so when we send something out to 50,000 people, I want to make sure that the language is really carefully thought out and make sure that it's going to get the type of responses that are going to be helpful for putting together these things.
So we're finalizing the language on the mailer now, so I'll give you all a little bit of a description on it. So we found out that Public Works is also looking at doing a mailer at a very similar time, and we've had some conversations about 2 mailers or 1. And so we really felt like 1 mailer may be the most effective because they will look very similar, and someone may say, blue postcard from Bothell, I already got this. So we're preparing kind of a call to action, like we want to hear from folks, information on how to on the Public Works project, and then information on the middle housing project, and letting folks know where to go on the website, including a QR code and including information about the upcoming community meeting. And so we're trying to keep it very simple so that it can be enough of a teaser to want people to find out more information, but not so complex that it's overly concerning, and then also something that does translate well. We're planning on doing, I believe, translation on the information in Spanish and I think Mandarin. I'd have to clarify that, but we want to make sure that it translates like for like and is simple for folks to understand, so that you only get so much space. And so trying to get the right amount of information without there being too much. We could probably send a preview of it once it's done, but we're still working on just finalizing that and debating, 1 versus 2, and how do we get people's attention without overly getting their attention or having them ignore us because they think they already got it and all of that.
I appreciate that. Thanks. Yeah. I just, especially some of the previous surveys that have been put out, either for bike plan or for middle housing, I've thought that the connotation of some of the words might have inspired different feedback depending on, what the prioritized audience is. And so just wanting to bring that up, and thank you for your work, and I would love to see a teaser if you have that in the future.
Other commissioners?
Commissioner Jones.
Yes, Commissioner Jones.
I would, so I very much appreciate what Commissioner Curd said. At the same time, I would just caution that anytime the public shows interest in what's happening within the city, that's a good thing. And even if some of that commentary perhaps is outside what we think the narrow bounds are, it's probably still good for us representing the city and for other city officials to hear it. So communication is tough, so I don't envy you. But it's so hard to get people to participate that I would just encourage you to not be too confined to what you think the wording should be, because your perspective as a planner or as a commissioner might not be the same as others.
And I just want to recognize that this outreach work is being coordinated and led by our community engagement specialist, Sarah Frost. She's not with us here tonight, but and she's working with our whole communications team at the city to work on this. So it isn't just planners working on this.
I think this is scary to a lot of people. And one thing I think which has happened is the other proposal we heard earlier with the one that was with it has been conflated with the middle housing. And people are saying we're looking at putting 5-story buildings everywhere in Bothell. And that's not what this is about. So I think that's a little bit of what's going on there. And whether that's deliberate or inadvertent, I won't hazard a guess. But I do know that that's out there. So I think it's important to be clear what we are talking about. To that end, looking, and I know you don't want to wordsmith, but I can't help myself to a certain extent. When you look at the vision statement and then look at what your template for the sub-area plans is, in the sub-area plan, you talk about allowing new infill and development compatible with the scale of existing residential neighborhood. And you don't, on number 7 in the vision statement, you don't have the words "the scale of." I think talking about the scale of these developments is important to really put context on it. So I'd suggest you look at that in the vision statement. Just add those 3 words in there. And then that does allow it leaves the door open to some of these other things if they're of similar scale.
Form-based code kind of approach.
Yeah, that was just right there.
Yeah. No, that's great input.
Other comments, questions? So are you hearing what you need from us?
Yeah, and I was just going to say that OTAC is still completing their review of the whole comprehensive plan through this with a racial lens, racial equity lens, and we decided to bring some preliminary code language forward now. So, but we wanted to give you something to chew on, but there's more coming from that. So, and I think that adding that reference to the scale of the neighborhood to that vision statement is a good idea. So again, and this is maybe a little less of a question for Planning Commission, because to meet the schedule that Council has asked us to do, I think we are going to need to go to public hearing on May 3rd. But I just wanted to confirm that you feel like you're ready for that, and we already have a good start on the code language, but or the plan language, and we'll be able to incorporate some of these suggestions and more of their analysis of the code by then.
So looking across the commissioners, I see a lot of heads nodding. I think Commission is ready for the May 3rd, if you guys are. And then you received a number of public comments that I assume you'll be addressing as you move forward in that as well.
Correct. And I will note that the comments that came in since the packet that we forwarded today were a mix, so we'll be separating those out for when we bring this back.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Hi, Sarah Gustafson here. Before we wrap up the missing middle discussion, I'd like to bring forward a few questions that I keep on hearing from a lot of our community members so that I can be better able to communicate. And the first question I have is about runoff and the impact on our amount of pervious and impervious surfaces in Bothell. I think a lot of people, as we heard tonight, are concerned that there's going to be more runoff into our streams with middle housing. My understanding is that since the middle housing needs to stay in the same envelope and be subject to the same pervious and impervious restrictions, there would be no major impact, but I'm wondering if our stormwater engineers at the city have looked into this and what their point of view is.
They have. We've had pretty extensive discussions with our utilities group, which includes stormwater, and we're actually having more. We just set up a meeting next week to talk with them and our transportation group. So those are ongoing, and I guess one thing I would say is the standards for addressing stormwater runoff have been bolstered over, especially over the last 10, 15 years. And you're right, this is essentially within the same footprint. The code has picked up on what was done for corner lot duplexes, where we have conversion of an existing structure to middle housing, where we do allow have some allowances for continuing, not increasing nonconformities with regard to setbacks. And with that, we've introduced some slight additions of impervious surface. But again, it's really limited to situations where you're converting an existing structure to middle housing. So for the most part, the impact is the same, and then our code protections for drainage are much stronger than they used to be.
Okay.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Senior Planner Boyd, but a new development would come under those newer, more stringent regulations. So it could actually have the effect of improving the condition. Correct?
That's true. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I guess I would say that's true for a full redevelopment of a site. A new greenfield development, I don't know if I could make that claim.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful, and I know you've been answering this question a lot, but it really helps to hear it again. My second question is about impact fees. In the past, we've looked at the impact fees for multifamily apartments and the impact fees for single-family homes. Where do the impact fees for each unit of middle housing fall in that spectrum?
That has also been a topic of discussion with our utilities folks, and we will be doing a fee study this year. So the discussion so far has been that, particularly in King County allows for a reduced impact fee for smaller units like ADUs and middle housing. So they're looking to apply that for middle housing, which will provide somewhat of an incentive, or at least less of a disincentive. But that'll all be coming out of that the fee study.
Thank you. And then my last question might be beyond the scope of the planning department. I know that a lot of folks are concerned about property taxes going up if a home in their neighborhood is sold for a high price and then converted to middle housing. My understanding is that any increase in property tax due to a one-off sale would be similar to an increase for any other sale of a home in the neighborhood. Is there any insight that we can provide right now on property tax increases?
I don't really have anything for you right now, but that is one thing that Ecor Northwest is looking at in their market analysis. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Okay, thank you so much for answering those 3 questions.
Yes, Commissioner Robson.
Hi, thank you. I was just wondering if, Dave, if when you get a chance to meet with the people in utilities and you guys come up with some findings, if we could get a report on that or just get a look at what you guys, what utilities have determined regarding stormwater or those, as you guys are having discussions, so that we can take that back to people, talk to us about it.
I'll look into that. I'm not sure that we'll have much to report prior to the fee study, but I'll raise out what they feel comfortable releasing at this point. Yeah.
Other comments or questions on the middle housing plan amendments? Seeing none, I think you got what you needed from us then?
Yeah, I was just going to point out, I did stop sharing again so that reminder of the others that are with us here, Commissioner Anders and also Jesse London from OTAC, if you have anything you want to add to the discussion, or if there are any questions for our consultant.
Seeing no indication, I think we'll close this item then and look forward to hearing about it on May 3rd.
Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business before us?
No.
All right. Reports from staff.
My report tonight will be very brief because I'm still catching up out of being out of the office. We have scheduled a middle housing tour on April 13th, which I guess is next week. It's a after hours, so we're hoping to take advantage of it being sunny a little bit later and do something after work. Dave, is the time for that 5?
Yeah, 5 to 7. We had one request. Somebody wanted to do a tour but couldn't do it on weekends, so we decided to try a weeknight. And I think they've been quite successful so far, so we're going to see how that one goes and decide whether to continue doing them. And one thing we added at the request of Councilmember McNeil, a foray into a single-family street and to a relatively recent ADU addition. And just by serendipity, the owner of that and occupant of the ADU was on the tour, so we got some inside information.
And then we have several presentations coming up to City Council regarding the comp plan, middle housing, transfer of development rights. If we look frazzled next time you see us, we have a lot coming up. And then again, just that we're working on that mailer for middle housing, and once it's finalized, we can share it with you all. And I think the biggest thing is just to tell your neighbors and your friends and people you know to keep their eyes open for it. And then if you all want to share the information on it with whatever networks you have, a mailer is one way to reach people, but not the best way to reach everyone. And so we're going to be posting things, of course, on social media and our email lists and all of that. But word of mouth from folks is always helpful too. So that's my report for tonight.
We did have some council member terms expiring and reappointments.
Yes, Karsten has been reappointed, so you'll see him next time.
Along with Claire Robson. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
I did use
I'm still
plural.
catching up on emails, and I think I only saw one that cursed. I didn't see yours yet. Sorry. Sorry.
So both commissioners, Robson and Curd, will be with the commission for 4 more years. Congratulations, I guess. So that's
Thank you.
reports from staff, reports from members. No, seeing none. So items to report to council, there was some discussion around parking and parking enforcement. Is that something we want to do now or look toward a finding or both? It does keep coming up. Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, Sarah Gustafson here, since I was the one who mentioned putting it in a note to council. What would be the most effective way to do this? Because I feel like it might be a one-off, but perhaps a one-off is what is necessary. Can we bundle it in with any other discussions that might be relevant in the next few weeks to a month?
Looking around the table, Commissioner Jones?
Is there a reason why we don't have parking enforcement? Is it just a cost issue? It's too expensive to hire enforcement folks? I mean, there must be a reason, right?
I think we'd probably want to follow up with exactly why we don't have parking enforcement. I will say, I think one thing that's maybe worth looking at in some conversations that came up, I believe, when City Council is working on their strategic plan, is it something that's also on their radar? So it would be, my brain is foggy, but might be worthwhile to see how that lands in their strategy as well.
I can say I worked on a downtown parking study that was a result of some of the first mixed-use development in downtown that did create that conflict between residents that didn't want to pay the fee and the commercial businesses that were counting on the street parking. So we did have some fairly involved discussions about parking enforcement, and bottom line was that it never pays for itself. If you try to make it pay for itself, you're going to disincentivize people from coming to your downtown, or you run that risk. So we talked about a lot of different options, but there wasn't anything that at that time that council was willing to pursue. So, yeah.
Dave, do you remember timeline on that?
When that happened?
Yes.
That was 2016, so that's quite some time ago. It was totally different council, so.
Could part of, and again, I don't know if it's a finding or a note, but could there be some sort of request for revisiting a parking enforcement study? So that we could get some analysis again?
Well, I've certainly heard interest in, when we move the Drew's proposal, we are addressing parking there, and I think it would be appropriate to have a finding around parking in that proposal at the very least. So that'd be one way to surface it again. And I think each time we talk about parking, it can be a finding we put in.
Several times in each step.
Yes, Commissioner Robson.
I think at that point, I'm a little worried that if we just put it like one finding, it's going to get overlooked. I think we just go to council while they're looking at, this is the perfect time to do it. We're at the strategic plan. We're talking about middle housing. Parking is on the tip of everybody's tongue every time we come together as a group. I don't think there's a bad time to bring up parking because it is on constituents' minds. It's in the forefront of their minds. regardless of the changes we're making. That's always what we can be talking about parks, and they'll be like, but what about the parking to the parks? And so I think I would be in support of drafting a letter to council and just presenting it and being like, the planning commission is noting the importance of parking to the community, and here are our thoughts on that.
Well, the way we've addressed that is to form an ad hoc committee and have less than a quorum of the commission get together, draft a letter, bring it back to the commission, which we would then review, comment, and then transmit to the council. So if there is interest in that, we could certainly entertain a motion to form an ad hoc committee to draft a letter on parking. Is there interest in such a motion? Commissioner Robson.
Well, I feel like I kind of did make the motion, but let me do it officially. A motion to create a letter to present to council. And I would volunteer to be on part of that ad hoc committee, but I'm a little afraid that me and Sarah are going to form our own little like subcommittee if we're always the two doing the letters. So it shouldn't be us two.
All right,
I'm willing to participate.
Well, is there a second?
Yeah, sorry. Commissioner Westerbeck, I second the motion.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that the commission form an ad hoc committee to draft a letter to council regarding parking enforcement. So is there discussion around that, including who potential members of that ad hoc committee might be? Commissioner Curd.
I feel everyone's eyes on me. Oh, and Commissioner Anders too has her hand up. Oh. So
Commissioner Anders.
Anders first.
Going to say I'm willing to participate in the house.
Oh, your connection is tough. We had trouble hearing.
Okay, I'm willing to participate in the committee to write the letter.
All right, so we have one interested party. Do we have another interested? Be good to have two. It's not a committee of one.
I'm certainly willing to participate in that.
All right, so we have a proposal that Commissioners Anders and Westerbeck be part of form an ad hoc committee to draft a letter on parking. All in favor of that motion? All right, so we have the motion is passed. Do y'all think by the next meeting, the 19th, or do you want a little more time than that? Or I guess you can report back to us on the 19th with
Sure.
your progress.
Sure. We'll probably try and keep it concise, as Commissioners Gustafson and Robson did, but that can sometimes be harder. So why don't we have at least a draft by then? What do you think, Commissioner Anders? Okay.
All right, great. Thank you both for volunteering to work on that.
I just want to clarify one thing from staff on this. So I think, at least from what I've noticed, some of the council agenda items have evolved a little bit. And so I think in the past, staff had put it in the packet, but it seems that reports from commissions has evolved more to reports from council members on their commission assignments. And so I'm mostly saying this to commit myself to remember to do it, but to make sure that we give you all direction on when that should be presented to City Council. I think it may need to be presented during a public comment period versus staff conveying it to the city clerk for that. So just wanted to note that. I think that's kind of what happened last time, but staff might have given some different direction. And so just wanted to note that for this time, and then we'll make sure to clarify just so we know moving forward.
Mr. Westerbeck?
I just want to clarify, since we are a commission and Commissioner Anders and I are writing on our behalf, the points we're trying to make are that we feel there's a need for parking enforcement or parking management in downtown Bothell, and that's the repeated finding of the Planning Commission, that there should be some sort of structure for that developed in time by the city of Bothell. Is that the idea? Please chime in if I've got that wrong.
Commissioner Jones?
I think you're going to want to also include the reasons why, especially the reasoning that a lack of parking management could impede some of the really important goals that I think a lot of council had.
Agreed.
Yeah. Because if everyone is focused on the fact that we can't find a place to park, we're not going to be in support of additional
No,
development.
yeah, I think, yeah, to get some of the good stuff we want, there's a reason that we would need parking enforcement. It's holding us back. Yeah, absolutely.
I just think the other piece of this would be to, I'm sorry, did you want to go? We do need to consider the DEI aspects
Yeah.
of whatever that parking management is,
Yeah,
so that we're not,
yeah.
right,
Punitive or,
yeah.
yeah, discriminatory.
And again, I think some of what's driving it is as we look at different types of development and the amount of, I mean, some of these developments, the parking is charged for the residents. So rather than pay for that, they're
Yeah.
parking on the streets.
Yeah, yeah, it's
So-
unbundled, so they have an option.
Yeah, and indeed.
Tragedy of the commons, here we go.
And we're going way back to when I was an undergraduate.
I studied it too, so I guess I'm dating myself.
All right, so do you feel you have sufficient feedback from the commission on that?
I think so. What do you think, Commissioner Anders? We can talk about it back and forth, yeah.
Okay, I see, head nodding. Okay, we'll look forward to that then. Oh, Commissioner Gustafson?
Hi, Sarah Gustafson here. I have an item which I don't believe is as high priority as, for example, the DEI issues, but the conventional wisdom that parking enforcement does not pay for itself. Well, that doesn't look at the grand scope of what a vibrant downtown could bring in. And Commissioner Westerbeck is one of the best champions of this idea. So I know you're going to pull it through no matter what.
That's true. It's kind of been my thing, isn't it? Make a downtown worth going to, and people will be willing to find their way there.
All right, thank you all. So I think we addressed that. Would there be any other items to discuss under this? I think we've been through reports from members and reports to council. So with that, there being no further business, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Commissioner Jones, is there a second?
I will second the motion to
Okay, it's
adjourn.
been moved and second. We adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you all. Our meeting is adjourned at 8:47. Our next meeting will be April 19th.